Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, and welcome to all our listeners. My name is Tim Dimmick and host of today's program. Today we are going to hear from a recently published author, Felicia Emanuel, who has just published a new book titled The Waiting Room. Felicia holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Media and Communications from Governors State University. She's had a diverse professional career, starting in television production as well as administration. She's a big advocate for Christian education. Felicia loves using her abilities to help others mature in their faith. Welcome to the show, Felicia.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Well, you're quite welcome, and we are happy to have you here. So, Felicia, before we dive into your new book, I always like to give our listeners a little bit of background of the person we're interviewing. So can you share with us a little bit about your upbringing, where you started, and what led you to where you are today?
Sure, I would love to. Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, and after high school, I decided I wanted to join the military. So I went off to the Navy, and after a short career in the Navy, not really knowing what to do with my life, I decided to get out, and I went to school. So I went to school for media communication. And it was during that time that I kind of revisited my love and passion for creative writing. I've always been a very creative person, and I've always loved to write stories and poems and songs. And so I decided that I wanted to use that interest and that passion in a more professional way. And that is kind of what led me to wanting to begin to write books. Mm-hmm. And so it's because I've always loved creative writing.
Okay. So you recently have published this book called The Waiting Room, which I'm certainly excited to learn more about. Before we get into that, though, what made you decide to write the book? You know, typically there's always a reason that spurs a person to put their ideas and feelings into print. What was that for you?
Well, let me say, initially I was pursuing my love for writing songs. I was pursuing music at the time, and it was during this major transition in my life, I began to experience a series of disappointments on that journey. Things just weren't turning out the way I felt that they should. I expected them to. So it resulted in an uncomfortable season of waiting. And during that waiting, I was waiting for clarification, for direction, waiting for things to fall into place. It just became more and more clear to me that wisdom was required in order to wait successfully, because in the waiting seasons, there's a common experience of opposition, to maintaining your hope throughout that period of time. Mm-hmm. So I began to research and discover a strategic approach to how we can overcome the opposition that enters into those waiting seasons. And that is what I share in my book. I share those strategies in order to help others navigate successfully through that opposition and be able to endure, hopefully, through the waiting season.
And these waiting seasons you're talking about, they can almost be in any part of your life, correct?
Exactly. They are. As a matter of fact, they are a consistent part of the journey for everyone. At some point, you will enter into a waiting season, which I call the waiting room. You will enter into the waiting room, and knowing how to navigate successfully through the various disappointments or the various experiences you will have or encounter during that time is critical.
Right. And I mean, today, we're such an instantaneous society. It's scary, right? I mean, everybody wants an answer now. And I find that even in people's decision making, many times I shake my own head and say, what are they thinking? And a lot of times people are put into bad positions because of their finances, their love life. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But a lot of times people really do make the wrong decisions when they're in those positions. So I'm guessing that, this is really what your book's about. And this is the type of person, regardless of what type of waiting period you're in or waiting season, can apply to all parts of your life. And this is where your book would be certainly helpful, I'm guessing, right?
Exactly. And just to reiterate something you just said, it is so true that many of us have forgotten how to wait because we live in this culture of convenience that's saturated with instant gratification. There's very few people who enjoy waiting. And I call us the drive-through generation. We can get food, we can get services in an instant. And with the onslaught of technology, we can even get people like in an instant. Now people have this expectation that when they call you or text you, that the moment that data reach your phone, you're supposed to respond. I can remember back in the day leaving the house and conducting business all day long without even the thought of having a telephone. Now today we can't even leave a room without grabbing our cell phone. It's because of these modern conveniences that waiting has become increasingly more difficult to practice, but yet knowing how to wait successfully is a very necessary discipline to develop. So in my book, I encourage the reader, look, we need to slow down and take a breath and reacquaint ourselves with the process of waiting.
Right. Yeah, and going back to your point of the phones, I mean, you're right. It has totally... I'm being in business. I remember the days when, first it was pagers and then it was fax machines and,
right.
You'd say, hey, I'll get this fax over to you in a little while. Now somebody expects like you said, a text back, an instant response, an email within minutes. And gosh, if you don't do it, it's like the world's coming to an end. But, when it comes into personal matters, obviously it is different. But again, you still have those same tendencies. Everybody's, rush, like you said, instant gratification. So do you have any idea, give me an example of maybe somebody that you've talked to or worked with that, was having challenges in that waiting period. And what was your advice to them? Do you have any examples of that?
I do. In the book, I write about how a friend of mine overcame the struggle with intimidation during the waiting season. She was on a journey to experience some professional promotion. She needed a new challenge. She was already a senior executive in her field, but when the opportunity presented itself, it exceeded her expectations, and it was just more grander in scope than anything she had ever done. And so she began to question her capabilities. But in the end, she decided she wasn't going to allow the feelings of intimidation to limit her, because sometimes, if we give in to that temptation to be intimidated, then we begin to limit ourselves from what we can achieve or what we can experience. And so because she denied that opposition, to her moving forward or acquiring the things she was desiring, her hope, she's now, she joined a new company as a general counselor, making like twice the salary that she made in her last job.
Beautiful. So one of the points that you make and wanted to make sure we brought up was, making the right decisions while you're in that waiting season, and making the right decisions or making the wrong decision, obviously can help or hinder those desired outcomes. And in this case, like you had spoken about, is, this woman who was intimidated by, the offer that came her way, but, was able to step out of that comfort zone. But God, if she wouldn't have stepped out of that comfort zone, right? Who knows,
exactly.
Who knows where she would be? The other thing that you talked about was, it's critical that readers understand the purpose of their tests and trials to experience God's ordained will. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I think it's very important to get some clarity on the benefit of what you're experiencing. Because even though, tests and trials are challenging, they're difficult, they have value. They have much value. And God uses them for our good, for our benefit, not, for our detriment. So being able to understand what the benefit or the beneficial outcome to what you're going through will help you be able to go through it, more hopefully. And, it will help you to be able to withstand or to endure that waiting process.
How do you help them understand that, you know what, you just got to take it one day at a time, look on the brighter side of things, and look at the positives that can come from this? How do you help them do that? Because I think that's probably the biggest challenge that keeps people, depressed, not happy with their life, not happy with anything around them at some point, sometimes.
Right. Well, I think, it's not always an instantaneous revelation. It takes some pursuing and some investigating and some meditating and some, prayer and maybe even, talking with other people who have experienced what you're going through and being encouraged by their story, being encouraged by their outcome, because sometimes we can't see, from our vantage point, any benefits, but there are benefits. There are people who have gone through what we're going through before, and so utilizing, their experiences could be very helpful for us.
Right. Well, and I always say, I look around a lot of times at successful people. I love to study successful people, and the thing you never hear about the successful people are the trials and tribulations they go through in the process of becoming successful. All you see is the outcome, and there are many, many situations where if you get a chance to actually listen to someone's story and where they came from and what they went through to get to where they are, most people would never go through those things. They would throw in the towel. And it's a perfect example of what you're talking about. So, Felicia, why would a prospective reader be interested in what you have to say?
I think that a prospective reader would be interested because at some point that reader and everyone will have to wait. Everyone at some point will be in a waiting season, and during their waiting will encounter the temptation to be discouraged, to be fearful or impatient, to even maybe be bitter or critical or unforgiving. So the principles within the 12 chapters of my book are filled with testimonies, stories, and strategies that the reader can apply to their lives to help them make the right choices when they encounter these temptations. It will help them receive insight and encouragement for maintaining a position of hope throughout their waiting season. That's why it would be of much value for them to listen to what I have written and what I have to say in my book.
Great. Makes sense. So what misconceptions do people have about the issues that you address? I always say there's always misconceptions about anything, right? What we play on in our mind versus reality. So what are some of those misconceptions?
Well, two very common ones come to mind right away. And the first one would be the misconception that discouragement should be the response to disappointment. Discouragement is a choice. You have to welcome discouragement. You have to give it permission to enter into your heart. And you have control over whether you entertain discouragement or not. It doesn't have to be your response to disappointment or unexpected events. The next misconception would be that negative words or a negative attitude will not have an effect on the fulfillment of your hope or your desire. In reality, negativity is counterproductive, and it usually makes achieving positive outcomes more challenging. So those are some major misconceptions that I would say people have.
I would certainly have to agree with that. There's not anything that substitutes for a positive attitude, especially when you're going through some of the challenges that we all face in life. So, Felicia, in addition to writing your book, you also do public speaking. So, tell me, who are the type of groups that you would speak to about this subject?
Well, I recently spoke to a group of single moms. You know, being a single mother is very difficult. It's very challenging, and so there's always a need for someone to be able to relate and to encourage you along the way. And so the book is very, very, it offers a lot of comfort and encouragement for those who are in those types of situations where they're challenged daily with, just life, just challenged with just living and, needing support and feeling overwhelmed at times with just their life. And so it's good to be able to come together with other like-minded people who are in a similar situation, who can relate to what you're going through and say, we can do this together. Let's unite and let's support one another. Let's help one another. You don't have to try to do this by yourself.
Right. Well, it sounds like an interesting book. So for all the listeners, again, the name of the book is called The Waiting Room. And again, the author, Felicia Emanuel. So Felicia, in wrapping up, if you could let our listeners know how they could get more information, number one, about your book, where can they find it? Where can they purchase it? As well as how could they touch base with you if they'd like to talk to you?
Sure. Readers and those listening can go to my website, which is FeliciaEmanuel.com. You can learn more about me. You can learn more about the book. You can even follow me on Twitter at Felicia Emanuel or on Facebook at Author Felicia Emanuel. You can reach out to me on any of those social media platforms, and I'd love to hear from you.
And your book is available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, my book is available on Amazon. There's also a link you can get to my book on my website, and it's a link to CreateSpace, which is a company that's a part of Amazon, but it's also available on Barnes & Noble, on iTunes. So it's on a number of distributors, with a number of distributors.
Great. Well, Felicia, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here. We wish you much continued success with your book and your ambitions in life. And on behalf of Business Innovators Magazine and Radio, we would love to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
You are quite welcome.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.